Welcome to Valor and Virtue. I'm Jim Danielson. Today we have with us Gunnery Sergeant Warren Campbell, United States Marine Corps retired. And we'd like to begin by asking the gunny to tell us a bit about yourself and what led you to become a Marine.
Well, back in the early 70s, I was a factory worker in Buffalo, New York. And short story there, being a factory worker, you really don't have a lot of chance for opportunity or going up and down, so to speak. You're a robot, so to speak. And in 1975, a Marine Corps recruiter called my house for my brother, who was a senior at that time. I had quit school, and he asked my brother if he wanted to join the Marine Corps. My brother had a very adverse opinion about the Marine Corps, but anyways, the Marine Corps recruiter didn't like that opportunity, so he came knocking at the door and asked my brother to repeat what he said, and he did. And I said, well, I may be interested. And so he took me down, and we did a test, and I passed the test, and he said, you're underweight. I was 111 pounds at the time. He says, you need to gain some weight. I said, okay, bananas or whatever it needed to do. But I met a gunny Orr down at a recruiting station. My recruiter was Sergeant, I forget what his name was, but Gunny Orr was the main guy, and he impressed me. The rank of gunny, that was the first time I got introduced. So long story short, then I gained the weight, and I got sworn on a delay program. And March 23rd, 1976, I went into boot camp, platoon 230. And I was Parris Island, yeah. I don't know any, I know there's a San Diego, but we swear by Parris Island. And it was 114 pounds. But I thought that was very unusual. There was another guy there that was 200 pounds, and I was 114 pounds. I gained and he lost. So I thought that was unusual. But what was...
It may not be relevant, but how much weight did you put on at Parris Island?
Close to 6 to 8 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah. And he lost close to 25 to 30 pounds, which was amazing. But what was different in boot camp from the factory was we learned leadership right from day one. You had responsibility. You were responsible for your bunkie, and your bunkie was responsible for you. And if you showed that initiative and responsibility, then the DIs, who seemed like they had PMS constantly, would give you a squad, or they make you a guide, or they make you platoon sergeant. And so that's one thing right off the bat with the Marine Corps, is they initiate leadership. They also teach you history, customs, and courtesy, and they make you do things that you've never done in your life. For example, if you've never gone 20 feet in the air, you go 20 feet in the air. If you've never gone on a rope, you go over water, they teach you how to do that. And they teach you how to swim, because they shake that rope and you fall. So
You talk about on the confidence course?
Yeah, confidence course, agility course, and all that stuff. So you learn right from get-go confidence. But I think what I really took away from boot camp and the Marine Corps right from get-go was they instituted respect. Respect for your bunkie, respect for your platoon, from your drill instructors, respect for your country, and all that stuff. And that's what I embedded in myself. Boot camp, of course, was 13 weeks, and for the first 2 weeks, I thought I'd entered into hell, especially being from a factory. But once we walked off of that parade deck and had the Eagle Globe and Ankle on us, we were all 6 foot. Regardless of how tall we were all 6 foot. Once we checked in our commands, I thought we were going to sleep in squad bays, which we did not. We slept in rooms. I was an experiment. And let me explain that to you. And not to be racist, I'm a white guy. Well, they put me in a room with the Lance Corporal George, who was black. And I was setting up this wall locker, and he walks in, and I hadn't picked up PFC yet. And he goes, what are you doing in this room? I said, First Sergeant put me in here. And he goes, well, you know I'm black. I said, well, okay. Well, Lance Corporal George took me under his wing, and we had what we call the Red Monster, which was all the stuff from boot camp and all that stuff. And he helped me set up my wall locker, and he taught me a heck of a lot, not only in motor T, but in the Marine Corps. And then I picked up PFC, private first class. And George and I became really tight friends. and we breached that barrier. He asked me where I was from, and I said Canada, and he said he was from Georgia. The only thing George was scared of was being married. I didn't quite stand that. But Lance Corporal George taught me the fundamentals of the truck. I've already been to Motor T school and all that stuff. Now, let me refer to the next gunny I came in contact with, a gunny Kellerman. And I was 24 years old at the time, so I was older than most of them. And I was in formation one day, and he said, Campbell, I'm going to send you in ammo school. I said, okay. Do I have a choice? He goes, no. And off I went. And I came back, and he says, you ever drive a wrecker? I said, no. He goes, you're going. I said, do I have a choice? He goes, no. And off I went. So I learned wrecker, ammo. I learned to drive a water truck. I learned all kinds of things. And long story short, he helped me pick up corporal down the road.
All right.
You have a question?
I was just thinking about ammo. What exactly?
Explosives and all that happy stuff. As a matter of fact, my first truck run with explosives was nitroglycerin, which scared the dog out of me.
Yes.
So as I picked up corporal, Gunny Kellerman taught me, again, responsibility, gave me 13 trucks and so forth. And he also taught me rules and regulations, as the gunny's way. You do not let an officer drive a truck or a Jeep. And I had a lieutenant bug me for I don't know how long. And finally, I let him drive a Jeep, and the lieutenant put it into the water.
Good heavens. So
I had to walk back about 2 miles, and a buddy of mine, I grabbed him. I said, you're the record. I said, we need to get that Jeep out of there before the gunny finds out. So I went to jump up in the wrecker, and the other door opened, and there the gunny was. Where are you going, Campbell? I said, we're going to retrieve a Jeep. He goes, you let the lieutenant drive, didn't you? I said, yeah. So we all went, got the Jeep, and I went to hop up into the wrecker again, and so did the lieutenant. And the gunny said, no, you all walk him back. So we walked back a couple miles, and the lieutenant says, oh, well, I'll talk to the gunny. I said, no, I'm already in trouble. You don't go to the gunny. And I got my tail chewed big time. But as the Marine Corps progressed, I learned a lot. But again, the idea of respect never left. It didn't matter what rank, who you were, where you were from. We got assigned to LSU 38, which was a Caribbean cruise. And we had Lance Corporal Hayes, which was a black Marine. We had a Stewart, who was an Indian. We had 3 or 4 from New York. I was one of them. We had one from Boston, 2 from California, one from Maine. Every state almost you could think of was in this platoon. And we stayed in a squad bay. Now, you could take your wallet that could have had a couple $1,000s in it, put it on your rack, and leave and come back, and you could guarantee that wallet wouldn't leave. We were tight. We were a good crew. And we went back to the unit after going down to the Caribbean, coming back, and those guys, I will miss my career.
But you know, something that's actually quite important, that it's not, you know, you put your wallet on the rack and it's not going to go anywhere. There's not going to be a medal citation somewhere for it, but it is still an expression of honor, wouldn't you say?
Yes. And again, the respect that we had for each other. And a little story here. One night we were chasing each other through the squad way. We had a tendency of we would punch each other. I don't know why we did that, but the duty, who was a supply sergeant, screamed and yelled at us. And I said, well, excuse me. So he wrote in the book that we were out of control and so forth. Well, I went on liberty that night, and we came back. Well, the following day was Monday. And the first sergeant called me in and said, Campbell, do you know where the duty book is? I said, no. He said, the duty book disappeared. I said, well, I had nothing to do with it. I went on liberty. So he called everybody in, and everybody said they didn't know where it was. Well, of course, that sergeant who was responsible got in trouble. Well, he did 2 or 3 pages of Motor T in that book. Well, that's the book that disappeared. So after we left and all that, about 3 weeks later, Lance Corporal Stewart and Lance Corporal Hayes, we're sitting around talking. I said, guys, you guys know where the duty book went? And they looked around and said, Pops, you know that dumpster that was near the barracks? I said, yeah. Do you want to know more? And they bailed me out. So they got rid of the duty book on it. So
Now, can we say that that is a morally legitimate distinction between that and the wallet on the rack?
morally,
Yeah.
a gray area, so to speak. Yeah, but
Well, we'll stick it in there then.
yeah. I left 8th Motors in '79 as a corporal, and I went up to headquarters Marine Corps '79, '81, and again a good group up there. I had a gunny. I can't think of his name, and he was a unique individual. He took care of us. And the gunny and the lance corporal almost got killed up there.
What happened?
We were in the motor pool one day, and we had a tire changing machine. And I don't know whether it was a defect in the machine or not. You know how they have the threads? Well, they wind it down. Well, what happened was the pressure built up, and it shot the tire up. Now, our barracks, our motor pool was about 20 feet high. Well, it went up and hit the ceiling, came down, hit a table, and bounced off, hit the gunny on it like this, and then hit the lance corporal, and almost killed them both. Matter of fact, I think the lance corporal caught it the worst. He had like 30-some stitches here, wow. Dislocated the gunny's shoulder and so forth. And the bad part about that was the lance corporal's wife was pregnant with twins, wow. 8.3 and 8.5 pounds. Yeah, but that was and we all pulled together on that. We were a tight-knit group up there too.
That must have happened fast.
Yeah, it did. We turned around, we heard this loud noise, and then down it came, and then when it hit the table, it almost careened off of one and then the other, and went off. So it was almost like a cannon shot.
Wow.
Yeah. What was unique about headquarters Marine Corps was we supported the Reagan inaugural, and every driver drove for certain people up there, and we were 2 weekends in a row. It was like 24/7. And what was different about that was, and here I'm going to get on a political pedestal here, I'm sorry. When Reagan took over, Washington, D.C. was inundated, and I'm going to say that again, inundated with American flags. North, south, east, and west of D.C. If you ever been up there, it didn't matter what, there was people protesting for America. So it was absolutely beautiful.
Wow.
So now I've taken you from '79 to '81. '81, '82, I lost my mind when I was on recruiting duty. I wasn't successful. I got fired. Couldn't sell eyes to a blind man. So '82 to '84, I went to Quantico. And here, I'm an experiment again. I checked into headquarters battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Murphy. And I said, Sergeant Campbell reporting his order. He goes, I'm sending you down to security battalion. I said, sir, I'm a 3531 Motor T. He goes, well, you're going to be working with military police. I go, well, I've never done. He said, well, I didn't ask whether you wanted to or not. Down you went. So I checked in Lieutenant Colonel Hemming, who was a winger at the time, but he was provost marshal. And I said, sir, why am I here? He goes, you're my motor transport chief. I said, well, I don't know nothing about security battalion. He goes, no, you're doing Motor T. Do I look? I'm a winger, so I'm going to experiment too. So for 2 years I spent there, and I took their, they had an 87% accident rate.
Excuse me, but that sounds really high.
Yes, it was. They were whacking up vehicles almost every week.
Really?
Yeah, they had, matter of fact, one accident, they had 3 Chevy Love trucks, and they banged into each other at the head gate. And that was one of them. They put a sedan into the trees one time.
That's a trick.
Oh yeah, that was. So I took the accident rate from 87 down to close to 5%.
Wow.
And I increased their TE from 8 sedans to 15 sedans.
Okay, TE is
table of equipment. And they needed more sedans. They needed to get away from the Chevy Loves. They needed full-size sedans. So I put together a whole package having to do with their maintenance, their mission, and an average patrol vehicle at Quantico, as small as a base was 10,000 miles a month. So
would that be racked up on the base?
Yes. Well, Camp Barrett, OCS, and all of that. I mean, they were running, so they needed more vehicles, and they needed vehicles that would sustain that mileage. Also, the electric equipment. So I put all that together, and I also put a training syllabus together that was combined from the AAA course and the Northern Virginia Criminal Academy School. And that's how I dropped my accident rate. But I didn't see the TE increase. To the day, I got orders to Okinawa, and away I went. So I went to my first tour over in Okinawa was 212 Lima Battery. Never been artillery before in my life, so here we go. So I got signed to Lima Battery, and Lima Battery went to Hokkaido. First time Marines went to Hokkaido since World War II.
Really?
So that was an experience.
Now you were doing motor transport.
Yep, I handled the battery vehicles. At that time we had Jeeps and 5 tons, and we did a shoot with the Japanese Ground Self-Defense Force, and I got stranded in. We did the operation in Yasubetsu training area, and then everybody went back except for a few of us and the vehicles, and we got stranded in Camp Bakai, which was still in Hokkaido. And Hokkaido is a little island in the tip of Japan. And so every day, I wasn't allowed to move my vehicles, but I had to count them. So I trained with the Japanese every day. I learned martial arts, and I learned with the running with them and all that stuff. And so finally, with the respect that we had to get together with us, they gave me a medallion and a few other things, and I got along great with them. So I went back to Okinawa, and they sent me to Headquarters Battery. Well, let me backtrack a little bit. After Hokkaido, we went to the Philippines. We did an operation there with the Lima Battery, and then they
Subic Bay.
Yeah. And then they sent me to Headquarters Battery, where I went to Korea for 2 weeks, and we did an operation there. It wasn't bear hunt. A team spirit, I believe. And then my year was over with, and then I went home. Then I was an instructor at MCSSS, Camp Geiger for a while. And then they sent me over to Camp Johnson to be a licensing staff NCO. I picked up Staff Sergeant, I picked up Sergeant 2 May 1980, and I picked up Staff Sergeant 880101, 8 years later. That was a long time. I was looking to get out of the Marine Corps because I was, stagnant as a sergeant. So I was instructor for 4 years over there, and Major Kuda transferred over to division. He was the Division G4 Motor Transport Officer, and he said, "Come on, Staff Sergeant Campbell, I want you to be my licensed staff CEO." So I left Camp Johnson and went over to Division G4, and we went to Desert Storm.
Really?
Yes, and I had 2 sergeants working for me. And when we moved out, we emptied Camp Lejeune. Now, if you can imagine that, every motor pool at Camp Lejeune, we moved them to either Sunny Point, Cherry Point, or Morehead City. We were running convoys almost 24/7. Sometimes we slept in the office, sometimes we slept in our vehicles, but we were running them constantly. And then when finally, December 7th, December 23rd, we left division to go over to Saudi Arabia, and we got waylaid in Italy for 24 hours. The plane broke down. They wouldn't let us off the plane. Interpol police surrendered the plane.
Okay.
Yeah.
Was this Christmas Eve about that?
Yeah. And well, we landed Saudi Arabia 25th, but I mean, we were sitting in Italy for 24 hours, and it was brutal. Our knees were knocking, but they wouldn't let us off the plane. Interpol police, because of our weapons. We had no rounds. We couldn't shoot anybody. But finally, we got off the plane onto another plane and got on to Saudi Arabia. December 25th, we checked in. We got a room and all that stuff. But we started running convoys the 26th of December. And we started doing licensing the 28th of December. So it was a nonstop. We did 2,500 combat licenses, 900 ammo licenses, and 27 commercial licenses. And finally, we came home, and I called my monitor. We spent 9 months over there in Saudi Arabia, after the war and all that stuff. And I called my monitor. I said, "What's going on?" He goes, I got good news and bad news. What do you want first?" I said, "What's the bad news?" He goes, "Where are you going to Okinawa?" I said, "I've just been away from my family for." He said, "Well, I'm your travel agency. Congratulations." So a little humor there.
Did you want to say you're fired?
So I checked into Camp Courtney, and I was a staff NCO there. And one Saturday, a major came to my room. He said, "We're going to stand up bear hunt." I said, "Okay." He says, "You're assigned to me now." So we went to this room, and I had 5 Marines and 2 Hummers. That's it. So I set up. He says, "Well, you're the S4 now." I said, "Okay." He says, and then 2 days later, he goes, "You're the S3 now." Long story short, within a 2-week span, I was S1, S2, S3, and S4. So I tried to get everything organized, and finally he comes in and he says, "You're gonna go to Korea." And
Now, at this point, are you in Okinawa?
yeah, I was in
Okay,
Okinawa.
right.
Yeah, and I said, "What am I doing?" He said, "Well, my wife is sick and I can't go. So you're gonna do a site survey team, which is what you do is you travel around Korea and you find the best site for a headquarters element, and that means egress and egress. The best way, 3 ways in and 3 ways out, so to speak." So I checked in into Korea, and I was the only staff sergeant. There was 15 of us, a lieutenant colonel, a couple majors, and a few captains. And I was told by the major that sent me over there that one of the captains didn't like me because I was the only staff NCO there. So
Well, why is that grounds not to like you?
I was out of the element.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. They wanted another officer there. They didn't want a staff NCO.
Ah, okay.
So right away I was like a salmon swimming upstream. So I turned 2. I got a Hummer and I started doing site surveys. And I took a sketchbook with me and I took a legal pad with me. And every time I went out to the field, I would find different areas so we could set up a headquarters element. And for a whole week we would go out. And when I went out, I went with another Marine who was my driver, but the officer would go out for like 2 or 3 hours. Am I allowed to say that? The officer would go party, and I would work. So at the end of the week,
what were their names?
I don't know. So we came back after a week, and we're sitting at this long table, and the colonel says to me, he said, "Staff Sergeant, what did you accomplish when you get out?" And I laid out the whole ground. I had roughly 12 to 15 different sites I saw, and only 3 that I really liked. And I categorized them A, B, C, and D. So the C was the worst, the A was the best. And I had my write-ups on it and all the sites and all that stuff. And he looked at me, he goes, he leaned forward, he goes, what were you officers doing? And they hemmed and hawed and so forth. He goes, so let me ask you this. He goes, you mean the staff sergeant's the only one that did any work this week? My face turned beet red. I didn't know what to say. So they went with Site A, and I went back to Okinawa, and my major pulls me in and said, "They were talking about you." And I said, "Yeah, I bet they were, and I got them in trouble." He says, "No, you didn't get them in trouble." He said, "Don't worry about that." He says, but they liked you."
Oh, good.
I said, "Well, that's a good thing, I guess." He goes, "Yeah, but I got good news and bad news. What do you want first?" I said, "All right, give me the bad news." He goes, Bear Hunt's been canceled. He said, "You're going back to your unit." I said, "Well, what's the good news?" He said, "You're going back to your unit."
So the time you spent looking around in Korea was just time.
Yeah. Well, they filed all that stuff. They took it all from me and put it into a file for the future reference. So I went back to Courtney, and I continued to march, and then finally I went back to the United States. Well, I called my monitor first, and I said, "Where am I going?" And he goes, "You got 2 choices." I said, "What's the 2 choices? 110 or 210? I said, "Artillery again." I said, "Well, that's not a choice." And so they sent me to 110 in 1992. And I was a headquarters battery motor transport chief. So I started doing Fort Bragg's. Artillery at Camp Lejeune only shoots 2 places. They do Camp Lejeune shoots, or they do Fort Bragg shoots. So I did 2 Braggs as a staff sergeant, and I got selected in 1994 as a gunny. And my S4 officer calls me up and says, "You've been selected a gunny." He said, "We're going to give you a battalion." And I looked at him, I says, "There's 3 gunnies down there, Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. They're all senior to me by 2 years." He goes, "Campbell, do you want it or don't you?" I said, "Yeah, I'll take it." So I hadn't been promoted yet, so I took my 3 buddies, and I'd come up through the ranks with the 3 gunnies, and I said, "Let's have coffee." So we sat down, and I said, "Guys, they're giving me battalion. How do you feel about it?" Well, 2 of my buddies said, "Pops." That was my nickname, by the way. We'll work with you. We're not going to work for you. Well, the other gunny said, "No." And he put his retirement papers in and left.
No kidding.
Yeah. So, and I was telling the sergeant major this morning, the morning that I got promoted, it was behind the motor pool, and my mechanics were back there, and the master sergeant, who was getting ready to leave, was in charge. And my wife and my boys were there. And I hear, "Attention, right phase, forward march." And all the S1 through S4 officers had come around. And at that time, Captain Fraser, who was my escort officer, pinned one side of my gunnies on, and then my wife and my boys pinned the other on. So I took over battalion in 94 and stayed there till 97. And I did 4 battalion COs, 10 S4 officers, 10 battery officers. I did 9 brags, a single CAX, a double CAX, a Norway operation. We did an Oklahoma operation. They rode me hard and hung me up wet. So the last colonel I had, Lieutenant Colonel Pace, fantastic man, absolutely. He was getting ready to leave, and he called me up in the office, and he says, Gunny, I want you to snap in a new colonel coming in. I said, sir, I have had enough. I'm tired. I said, I want to go on. I said, an opportunity to go over to the truck company, to be the company gunny. My buddy just got promoted over there, and he wants me over there. He goes, you find your replacement. I said, well, that's a hell of a note. So I called up headquarters of Marine Corps. No self-respecting Motor T wants to go to artillery because they wear us out. So long story short, I got a hold of a Gunny McIntyre, and he said, yeah, he'll come down. And so I transferred over to the truck company, Major Shesko, who was my corporal back in 1976, was a major that took over truck company. So we were friends. And I left the last
we're
two.
well into the 1990s by now.
Yeah. And he wanted me to pick up Master Sergeant, and I did too. But one of our presidents, President Clinton, am I allowed to say that? In his wonderful wisdom, put 63 gunnies out in 1998. And I was one of them.
Why did he do that?
A mandate, he wanted to downsize. And if you can imagine the experience that he put out. But Major Shesko calls me in the office one day, and he says, Pops, we're going to have a retirement ceremony. Sir, with all due respect, I came in the Marine Corps quiet. I want to leave quiet. And he says, come to attention. I said, excuse me? He said, did I not give you a direct order, Gunnery Sergeant? So I come to attention. He goes, now this is the only way I'm going to get you to shut up. And he says, we're going to have a retirement ceremony. So he did it upright. He had the pass review with trucks. We must have had close to 300 some people at my retirement ceremony. The chief of staff from division, I probably had 6 or 8 full bird colonels. I don't know how many people there. It was, and he did it upright, and I really appreciate it. 22 years in the Marine Corps. In my heart, I'm still a Marine. I'll never leave it. Oftentimes, my friends will tell me I hang on too tight. What does that mean? You're no longer in the Marine Corps. Well, yeah, okay, you're not in a uniform anymore. I'm still a gunny. Now, when I introduce myself, I'll say, you ask me what my name is. Yep. Warren, Gunny, or Ugly? Ugly because I don't consider myself very good looking. Warren because that's my given name. But a gunny rank in the Marine Corps is a go-to person. He may be an MOS, but he's a dad. He's a financial wizard. He puts his collar on backwards sometimes. He's a go-to. If a gunny can't do it, nobody can. And I'll give you a financial situation. When I was at 110, I would tell my troops, if you're going to get in a contract, bring it to me first before you sign it.
Right. Yeah.
And there was people out in Jacksonville, no offense to Jacksonville, that were screwing over Marines right and left. And one of my Lancer Corporals came in, and he had bought a 1964 Mercedes, and he had signed the contract at 35% interest rate.
Wow.
And I tore him up. I reamed him a new butt. And then I called his dad, and his dad came in. I said, look what your son did. And he said, what do we do? I said, I don't know, but I took it to JAG, and JAG says, contract's too tight. We can't get him out of it. So what his dad did, his dad went and paid it off completely and charged his son 2% interest rate. And I said, next time I'm going to call your dad and let him beat your butt. But we do an awful lot as gunnies. I'm 71 years old now. I take every opportunity to get back in uniform. Last year I went to 2 Marine Corps balls. I've been to many funerals, which, you know, your heart sinks at that moment. But you never leave the Marine Corps. When they say once Marine, always Marine, it's true. You said you were in 4 years, yeah. It'll never leave you. Why? With all due respect to the other branches of service, we're different. I don't know whether it's the loyalty to each other, the loyalty to the Corps, the loyalty to the United States. I don't know what it is, but it's so embedded into us. And sometimes wives will tell you you're brainwashed, or my first wife told me I was anal, but it's not. It's the dedication, it's camaraderie, and we will never stop all the way to our gravesite. We will never stop being Marines.
At the beginning of this conversation, when you were talking about being at Parris Island and how they teach you responsibility, respect, just building camaraderie, right?
Yes, from day one. I had thought I'd gone to hell for my first 2 weeks there, but later on down the road, and I'll tell you right now, I'll never forget the 4 drill instructors I had: Sergeant Rebecki, Staff Sergeant Gant, Staff Sergeant Morgan, and Staff Sergeant Yarborough. I'll never forget them as long as I live. Never, never, never.
This is a question that I've asked a few people, and it makes perfectly good sense to me. I thought the drill instructors were funny.
Funny?
Yeah. Did you?
No. My last name's Campbell. We had 2 Campbells. One, I was from New York, and the other one was from Florida, and they used to bang our heads together and tell us we were brothers. No, there was no humor. I often laughed at a few incidences. We had a guy by the name of Nance, Private Nance, and he was notorious for hiding things out of his footlocker. He would put things up on shelves behind the signs. And one day, Sergeant Rebecki came in and started finding these things. That was funny. We had a Private Presley who would urinate his pants, the drop of a hat. He had nerves, and that was funny.
How did the drill instructors deal with that?
Not well. We had I was on guard duty in the rifle
Now, back
range.
in those days, you were wearing the green satins, right?
Yes,
So if a guy wets himself, you can't miss it.
Yeah, and Private Presley had to go get a swab constantly, and we thought he was going to put him up, but Becky kept him. I had guard duty at the rifle range, and I was a supernumerary. And one night, one of the guards were screaming, "Post number 9's in trouble." So we went from 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 9, and we were looking for Private Ashley, and he was nowhere to be found. He was on guard duty, and we were yelling for him. Finally, he said he was up in a tree, and we had a big the corporal had a big flashlight. He was up there, and the private's up in a tree. Why are you up in a tree? Because of him. And here's this alligator sitting there with his mouth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and the corporal that we had, who was active duty, grabbed a tent peg, shoved it in the gator's mouth. "Come on down, Prive." So that, we had a few comical incidents during boot camp, but no, I found no. But Becky especially, that man had a attitude from day one, and the last day he had that attitude, and it never left. Staff Sergeant Gant one day, we had drill competition, and one thing my platoon could not do is drill. We did everything wrong, absolutely. And we were out in competition. We dropped rifles. We did everything wrong. Oh, yeah, we did everything wrong. So we get back to the squad bay, and Staff Sergeant Gant dismissed his rest of his drill instructors and sent them home. And when you make Dad mad, you make Dad mad. And our senior drill instructor was mad. We embarrassed him. And that night, all the way to 6 a.m. that following morning, we PT'd, we cleaned the squad bay. He threw racks. He did everything. There was no love lost. He made us pay big time.
Yeah, there's nothing funny about that.
No, but at the end of boot camp, I devised a poem having to do with our senior drill instructor, and I wrote it on a piece of paper. I don't know whether he still got it or not. And we all got together various times in the head. And any time we were away from the drill instructor, we all got together and combined this poem I don't remember off the top of my head. And then finally, the day we had a chance to give it to Staff Sergeant Gant. And hopefully he took it upon retirement and kept it and so forth.
Now, was this toward the end?
Yeah, that was to the end. Yeah. Staff Sergeant Gant he meant a lot to us. I'll tell you one more story when I was with 110, and then I'll stop. I had a second lieutenant Tavuchis. Now, what they do in artillery is they give the 08s as secondary MOS to train them, especially second lieutenants. Well, I was a staff sergeant. I walked into my cage one day, which was my kind of tool area, and here's the second lieutenant sitting. And I said, "Sir, can I help you?" He says, "Yeah, I've been assigned to collateral duty as your motor transport officer." I said, "What do you know about motor T?" He goes, "Nothing." I said, "Sir, I want you to sit there and watch." I had a lance corporal, a corporal working for me. I said, "I want you to watch." So long story short, he picked up first lieutenant, and he came around when I was a gunny. And he goes, "Gunny, I want you to do me a favor." I said, "What's up, sir?" He goes, "I want you to do me a fitness report." Now, gunnies do not do officers' fitness reports. I said, "Sir, I'm not going to do that." He goes, "I want you to do it. I want you to tell me what you think of me." I said, "All right." He said, "Seriously, I want you to tell me what you think of me." So on a fitness report, it's got various sections. It's got about 23 sections that break it down on your leadership, and at the bottom, you actually say what. And I did him a good fitness report. Well, I heard as a colonel, he put it in a frame and put it in his office.
Nice.
Colonel Tavuchis is now retired. Colonel Fraser's retired. Colonel Socklaven's retired. Major Shesko's retired. All these officers keep in contact with me. Matter of fact, Mike Fraser just talked to me yesterday. We talked about the morbid situation of burial and how we want to be cremated and all that stuff. I said, when I go, sir, you better come in uniform. All officers required in uniform. He goes, "Gunny." I said, "Hey, it's going to be my will. All officers better be in uniform." And he laughed at me. So, but I still stay in contact with troops. I still maintain the camaraderie that we learned. We will never stop being Marines. When I went to the ball up in Maryland, they picked me to be the oldest Marine, which is something that we dread. I dread it to no end. And I was part of the cake cutting ceremony. They gave me a piece of cake and so forth. And yeah, the young Marine next to me was 17.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not kidding.
Now, at that age, don't your parents have to sign to get you in?
I guess, yeah, but I met, we were rehearsing. I get in there and I look at him. I says, "How old are you?" 17, gunnery sergeant. He goes, "By the way, they gave me orders. I'm supposed to tell you how to march." I said, "You're kidding." I said, "Who gave me the orders?" He goes, "Sergeant Major." I said, "Well, you follow your orders." "I can't give a gunny orders." I said, "Well, you do what you were told to do." And he was shaking. The night that we actually did the cake, that poor boy was a basket case. But I missed the Corps. Have you noticed?
That's sort of where we wanted to go as we come to the end. That this experience shapes us, doesn't it, in an important way?
I took a lot when I retired. I went to work. There were several jobs I had. I was a contractor for a while, and I took a lot of my leadership to the outside world. Oftentimes that doesn't fit in. You can't be a gunny in the outside world. You can't bark orders and, of course, stuff like that. But finally, when I calmed down after so many years, I took the knowledge. I took some of the camaraderie with me, which civilians don't understand. But I took the knowledge with me. I adopted that. When I was with a company called L3, I found an easy way to calibrate weapons. In the Marine Corps, they had a calibration system about this big, weighed about a couple hundred pounds. They used it to calibrate 50 cals, 60 cals, and I thought that was ludicrous. So I went to the Army, and I found a laser system. It's about this big, and they had various attachments to it for the 16, the 50, and the 60. I don't know whether they even had a Mark 19 or not. So I did a write-up on it and sent it to L3. However, that got me a little trouble because I went outside the corporation, and they felt that I shouldn't have done that. So I got my tail chewed, and then they were going to write me up, and I said, "Well, no." But it would have worked. I mean,
You mean what you discovered was not used?
Huh?
Like you had this other way of doing the calibration, and
Right.
they didn't use it?
No, they didn't like. Well, what was the offense was, I think that because I went outside the L3 concept, so to speak, and went to the Army, they didn't like that. So enough said, I guess. But it was I mean, you could keep the attachments on your hip. and the laser was only this big. It was $5,000 for the laser and $100 for the attachments. But if you go to combat, talk about efficient.
Right, sure.
So enough said, so to speak. But at the age of 71, I'm outspoken. If you ask me my opinion, well, as a gunny, I had colonels that would ask me, "Gunny, what's your opinion?" And they'd get it in a heartbeat. Sure. When I was a staff sergeant, it wasn't much different. I got myself in trouble during Desert Storm, or Desert Shield, matter of fact. I was with the division, and Major General Keyes had a meeting, and we were going to meetings like every other day. Oh, it was a nightmare, and I wasn't getting job done. So I was sat at the big table at the end, and Major General Keyes made a mistake one day, went around the table, asked our opinion. And he said, "Staff Sergeant, what are you getting out of these meetings?" I said, "I'm not getting a damn thing out of this meeting. I'm sitting here on my ass not doing my job." And attention, we all stood up, and he left. Well, the Chief of Staff tore me a new one. "And we're not going to invite you to a meeting again." I said, "Good, that's what I want. Get out of here."
Yeah, excellent. That's the way it should go.
Yeah, but, we do, I don't know, we as Marines are different. Were you in the Corps yourself? Yeah. And you know it. It stays there. There's no... some people leave the Corps bitter. I've come in contact with it. And they categorize the Corps, and I correct them quick. It's not the Corps that maybe stung you, maybe the unit. As a Corps, we're good. We have a new commandant, or the Corps has a new commandant, General Berger. And a lot of criticize him. He's downsizing the Corps. However, I had a 15-minute one-on-one with him one day. I went to the Marine Corps Association dinner, and I walked up to him when somebody introduced me, and he shook my hand. I said, "I'm an old Motor T guy. I came in under the Jeep in the Deuce and a Half." I said, "Why are you doing the changes you're doing?" And he told me, he says, "We can't fight like World War II anymore. We can't fight like Desert Storm anymore. We have to be parallel with our enemy or advanced more. And I'm taking the young Marines, I'm giving them the technology and the knowledge, and they're running with it. And I like that. And that's the way we have to be more advanced. We have to be ahead of our enemy." And it made a lot of sense to me. I mean, he downsized the artillery, he downsized the infantry, he got rid of the tanks. He was criticized by all that, but we have to look to 2030 and ahead. And I think General Berger's doing the right thing. I know there's a lot of generals out there that just don't like him, but apparently he's doing right because Senate and Congress approved it. So I have a lot of respect for the man. I wish him luck because I know he's like a salmon. He's swimming upstream. All the old generals don't like what he's doing, but you got to do what you got to do.
So when you were unexpectedly retired from the Marine Corps, you weren't angry?
No. Well, I was bitter a little bit towards the president. I wanted to stay in for 40. There was I had no, I wanted the 40, see if I liked it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was a little bitter there. I didn't want to get out. But it is what it is. I wasn't ready. A lot of people are ready to walk out the door. I wasn't ready. I was a company gunny, and I loved every minute of it. As a company gunny, you do everything. You do human relations, you do PT, you do education, you do everything. And we had 350 Marines, and the biggest truck company in the Marine Corps. And we, as a company gunny, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, you handle PT. Monday through Friday, you do the run for lunch bunch. We do operations in the field. We had a Thanksgiving, and between me and my major, there wasn't a Marine in that unit that didn't have a Thanksgiving dinner.
That's good.
The officers bought ham, the staff NCOs bought turkeys, and we had guys down in the armory. We delivered food to them. We took care of everybody. My last 2 years was fun. The major's policy was, or his theory, you never know what the enemy looks like. And during one field operations, they give you a list of what you're supposed to take in the field. One of the things you take is your gas mask. So they had 4 officers decide tonight we weren't going to take their gas masks. So we were in the field one day, and out from around the woods came Santa Claus. We had a master gunny dressed up as Santa Claus. Well, you know what Santa Claus did? He threw a gas grenade, and those 4 officers were suffering. And the moral of the story is any enemy could look at, So, that was his theory. But we had fun. We really did. It was good to go. Sergeant Major Yeagle. He's Sergeant Major of the troops down at Citadel.
Oh, really?
One of my best friends. Yeah, matter of fact, I just talked to him not too long ago. Really, really a good friend of mine. Master Gunny Howard. I could go on and on mentioning this. You never stop staying in contact. There's a Master Gunny. Oh, I can't think of his name. Tim is his first name. And I went, have you ever been to Helen's Restaurant down here? It's on 17. It's a mom and pop.
I haven't been there.
Oh, it's a mom and pop restaurant. It's on 17th, right past the Yeah, yeah. And I'm trying to think of a retired Master Gunny. And I go into this restaurant day, and he looks up at me. He goes, "I know you." I said, "Yeah, I know you too." And he was a sergeant record driver for me when I was a gunny. And he retired a Master Gunny. And he grabbed me and hugged me. He said, "Oh my gosh, I haven't seen you in years." And that brings up another story. Desert Storm story. We've been running convoys. I had been up about 37 hours. We've been running and running and running and running. And I come out of the mess hall at night. The sun was going down, and we were in this green hooded thing. And I was beaten. I had a styrofoam cup of coffee in my hand, and I look over, and there was a Marine standing next to me. Looked worse than I did. I didn't know how that was possible. And I said, "How you doing?" He goes, "Fine." I said, "Your coffee hot?" He goes, "Well, it's drinkable." I said, "Where are you from?" He goes, "California." I said, "Who are you with?" He goes, "1st Marine Division." I said, "I'm with 2nd Marine Division." He goes, "Well, I'm with tanks." I said, "Well, I'm with Motor T." I said, "How long have you been in the Corps?" And we compared years. I said, "Where'd you go to boot camp?" He goes, "Parris Island." I said, "Yeah, me too." I said, "Who are you with?" He goes, "Platoon 230. And I looked at him. Really? I said, "You got to be kidding me." I said, "Shangar?" He goes, "Campbell?" Now, this is 1990. We graduated boot camp in
76. Yeah.
Yep. And we looked at each other, and I'm not going to lie to you, we had a little tears in our eyes, and we grabbed each other, and I said, "You got to be kidding me." We talked a few more minutes, and then I never saw him again. He was gone. Wow. Yeah. Small Corps.
Yeah, you're right. That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what else would you want to ask me?
But you decided to retire here. I mean, to live here.
I retired, and I went to Maryland. And then I got, I married, I got divorced once, got divorced a second time. And then finally in 2019, my second wife said, "I want to go to West Virginia." And I said, "I wanted to go to North Carolina." She goes, "Well, you'll never do that." I said, "Okay." So she went to West Virginia. I stayed up there, packed up the house that I rented, and bought a house down here in 2019. I've been there ever since. This is my home. I'm close to my Marines.
Right.
Yeah, I do commissary shopping, and I'll die here. I'm going to make arrangements to be buried at the Veterans Cemetery, and this is my home.
In a certain way, you'd think it would be good if more people in our country could see a community with a tradition, which is something that people need but don't have all that much.
Yes. I'm the 2nd generation of Marines in my family.
Wow.
My grandfather was in the Corps 1904, 1912, and logged everywhere he went in. I lent the logbook to the Marine Corps Museum twice. Once when the museum was in the Navy Yard, and then I lent it to the museum at Quantico now, and they both times said, "Well, we'll give you a letter from the Commandant so we can have it." And I said, "You're not getting that logbook." It's over 100 years old now, but he went in a private, came out a captain. Fantastic man. My grandmother talked about him with a teenage glow in her face. She never, when he died, she raised 3 daughters and a son without a husband, and she never remarried. And anytime she talked about my grandfather, there was no negative. There was no bad thing. I never heard anything bad said out of her mouth. such a wonderful
Well,
woman.
that is certainly an expression, isn't it, of the Marine Corps value of commitment.
Yes, yes. And you know, we stand by sometimes the old battles, the Battle of Chapultepec, Guadalcanal, and those are good stories. But let me tell you two stories nowadays. One is about a corporal and lance corporal that were in Iraq recently in the 2000s. I don't remember when. And General Nivel tells this story. A terrorist bomber was getting ready to run the gate, the gauntlet, to go into this barracks and blow it up. And all the Iraqi guards ran, except for two Marines, a corporal and a lance corporal that were at the gate. And they fired on this vehicle till it stopped and then blew up. And they had 9 seconds left of these two Marines' lives. And they stood their ground. Now, that story is recent. It's not Guadalcanal. I'm not going to take away from that, but the heroism.
That is courage.
Yes.
Yes.
The second story I'll tell you was it was put on, I think, iTube or TikTok or whatever it was, and there was a fire at the senior citizen home in Washington, D.C. And you watch Marines run from 8th and I across the street to save these seniors out of the house. Of course, they had firefighters there and construction workers, all that, but you saw Marines running to the fire. And they asked the gunny, "Did you give him the order?" He goes, "No, I didn't have to." Of course, 9/11, people ran to the Pentagon. They didn't run away from it, they ran to it. So, you know, heroism is still there. Courage is still there. Dedication is still there. And it's not just the embedment in our hearts of the Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. It's the embedment of the Stars and Stripes, our America. Has the American way left? No, I think it's hovering. It depends. You guys were around for the Reagan era.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He gave us a 14% raise across the board. And when he got reelected, he gave us 10% raise across the board. But he gave us more than that. Did the world fear us? No. The world respected us. Along with his better half, Margaret Thatcher, you wouldn't come after America anymore. You wouldn't come after Great Britain anymore. And then Miss Reagan, what a wonderful woman, you know. So one of his statements was, a lot of people wonder what they've done in life. The Marines don't have to wonder. They do it.
Yeah, they don't have that problem.
They don't have that problem.
You know, I was watching an interview with Pat Buchanan one time, and he said it was the day that George H.W. Bush was being inaugurated president, and all the furniture had been taken out of the Oval Office. And he was standing in the Oval Office with President Reagan's press secretary, and President Reagan walked in. And he said, "Just wanted to take one last look around, you know," and he kind of walks around the room, and he turns to these two guys and he says, "My biggest regret as president was sending those Marines to Beirut." And then he said he just left the room.
Yeah. A comical story about President Reagan. I don't know who that interviews the actors and actresses and all this stuff, but who's the guy that does the imitations? Rich Little.
Oh, he's still around?
I don't know, but they were interviewing one day, and they said, "There's a rumor about you being called to the White House. Can you tell us that story?" He goes, I'm not going to admit it, but I'm not going to deny it. He says, I was doing a gig one time in California, and 2 Secret Service walked into his room and said, you have to come to the White House. And he thought he was in trouble because, of course, he imitated all the presidents, of course.
Right, sure.
And so he says, am I in trouble? He goes, President Reagan wants to see you. So they put him on a plane. He had 3 or 4 Secret Service guarding him, he said. And he got in there, and the press secretary pulls him aside. He goes, the president has laryngitis. Would you do a speech behind the curtain with the president? And he went, what? So President Reagan gave a speech with Rich Little talking behind the curtain.
Yes, well, that's exactly the kind of tale you have to want to be true. It really has.
He said, but I won't, he said, yeah, but what more would you like to know about me and the Marine Corps?
Well, I'm thinking this has been such an excellent conversation.
I was scared to death.
Yeah, nothing to be afraid of. Everybody in the room's a Marine. This has been terrific.
My country, I was when I was in the Marine Corps a year and a half illegally. Did I tell you that?
How'd that happen?
Well, Sergeant Cody was the first recruiter, and he put on the paper. I told him I was born in Canada. He goes, "Oh, don't worry about it," and he put U.S. Native on there.
Now, are you saying that at the time you joined the Marines, you weren't a citizen?
Yeah, I wasn't a citizen.
Oh,
wow. So when I was a lance corporal, I applied for embassy duty, and I went down to Mainside Camp Lejeune to talk to the United Nations building person, and we're sitting there talking, and he says, "Where were you born?" I said, "Toronto, Ontario, Canada." He goes, "Oh, okay. Let me see your green card." I don't have a green card. He goes, "Let me see your INS 151 card." I don't have one of them either. He says back, goes, "We have a problem." I said, "What's the problem?" He goes, "Well, I can't take you, and you need to go see your commanding officer." So they sent me back up to French Creek to see Cap Lewis, and Cap Lewis went high and to the right. He screamed and yelled at me, "Go see the colonel." So I walked up the path to Lieutenant Colonel Simmons, little guy, and I said, Lance Corporal Campbell reporting as ordered. "Sit down, Marine. Would you like a cup of coffee?" And I'm sitting there like this, and he says, "We have a problem with you." I said, "What's the problem, sir?" He goes, "You can drop your uniform and walk out the gate. We can't stop you." I said, "Well, that's not good." He goes, "No." So he picks up the phone, and I don't know who he talked to, but he slammed the phone down because that's not satisfactory. So he picked up the phone again. And long story short, he said, "This is what you're going to do. For the next 3 weeks, you'll get up, you go to chow, and you go to your room. Lunchtime, you go to chow, and you go to your room. You will not go to the motor pool. You'll not work till we get this straight." I said, "Well, my fellow Marines aren't going to understand that." He goes, "Did I ask you about that?" He goes, "And I'm not giving you an order. I'm just telling you what you need to do." Within 3 weeks, I got promoted to corporal, and they gave me a vehicle, and two of my buddies were corporals. We had to go to Raleigh first to get tested. And we're sitting in the hallway, and the immigration guy comes out and said, "Okay, where's Warren Campbell?" He goes, "Oh, this is going to be a long day." So he pulls my two buddies in and read them the riot act and told them that if they lie, well, I don't know what questions they asked them, but they come out and say, "Pops, you go in there, we're going to go to jail." So I go in there, and he reads me the riot act, and he says, "Okay, we're going to give you a test." So he gave me 100-question verbal test and 100-question written test.
Now, was this things like who was the first president of the United States?
Or the testing was everything from personality opinions to like who was the 16th president of the United States?
Yeah, sure.
Of course, Lincoln. What was my opinion of the flag? If you went to war to Canada, what would you do? I mean, it went on and on and on.
That's a good question, actually. If we went to war with Canada, what would you do?
I would have no choice.
Oh, that wasn't really a question. I was just saying.
Yeah,
it's an
no,
interesting question.
So Raleigh. Then I went to New Bern to fill out the papers, and then I went to Fayetteville to get sworn in.
That's a lot of running around.
Yeah. And I wasn't allowed to work for all that time.
Wow.
Yeah, and and I never went on embassy duty. I got married instead. So, but Colonel Simmons was the.
So this was expedited, and very quickly you became an American citizen.
Yeah. I don't know who he talked to the second time, but he pushed it. He says, "I got a Marine here. He's not supposed to be here." So that was comical. So, and then I became a commandant's driver for a while, and I had to go to the FBI for a background check. I got my TS, and my admin people filled out the paperwork. So I'm in the FBI office on 14th and K, and I'm sitting there, and the FBI's asking me questions and so forth. And he goes, "By the way, this afternoon we're putting you on a plane." I said, "Where am I going?" He goes, "Back to Canada. We're deporting you." I said, "Excuse me?" I said, "What do you mean deporting me?" He says, "On your paper it said U.S. Naturalized. You're not naturalized. You were born." I didn't fill out that paperwork. My admin people did. So he had to call back my admin people, and they admitted it. And he said, okay. He was serious. He was going to put me on a plane.
Bounce you out of the country.
Damn doggone straight. Yeah, I like. That's a document. It's an official document. So I went, oh, okay.
Did you go on to drive for the Commandant?
Yes, I did. I drove for General Burroughs.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And that was a rough time too, because that was during the Iranian crisis. And I would pick him up from quarters at 06 in the morning, take him to the Pentagon, and then pick him up again between 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning. And we did that for 3 weeks.
No kidding.
Yeah, long hours, long hours. And that was before Reagan took over. So Carter was president then. And that was brutal, absolutely brutal. General Burroughs was a Southern gentleman, straight up. He was just a fantastic man. There was one morning, I dropped him off at quarters. He was the assistant commandant then. And it was about 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning. And he was due to go back to the Pentagon at 6. So he said to me, he says, no sense he said, come on, let's get something to eat and have a cup of coffee. So his aides pulled me into his library. We sat there and had some sandwiches and coffee and talked. He treated me like a son. He treated me good. He was okay, let's go. And went back, did it all over again. I don't remember ever saying anything bad about President Carter. One night though, we came back and he was war heart. He was tired, and he sat back in a chair. And I said, "Sir, how's the president?" He did that H word and went to sleep. Okay, must have been a bad day. But he was very. I picked him up one time. General Burroughs and Lieutenant General McClellan were in the car, and they had their wives. And I got out of the car and saluted the wives, and I went, "Oh, was I supposed to do that for the generals?" Well, they were already out of the car. And General Burroughs walked up, put his hand on my shoulder. He goes, "Son, I'm glad you're a gentleman first and Marine second." I'm thinking, I still have a job. So,
yeah, well.
What more do you want to know, sir?
Well, I think this is good. We've given our editors plenty to work with.
Well, if nothing, the rank of gunny is the ones you need to approach. Like I said, they're the chief cook and bottle washer. The finest NCOs I had was in 110. Those guys were just fantastic. I couldn't ask better. I covered them. They covered me. We would have meetings periodically and shut the door and talk. And I told them, you can tell me anything you want, be respectful. And oftentimes 50% of their suggestions were true and good, and we went with them. There are times where, I don't know what I'm supposed to, gunny, we're not allowed to have extra parts because that circumvents the supply system. And I had a shed in the back that was full of parts. And during a phase 1 inspection, my phase 1 was coming up and I forgot about my shed. And I went, the night before I went back to look and the shed was gone, disappeared.
The whole shed?
The whole shed was gone.
Wow.
Yeah, it was up. And I went to my NCOs. I said, "Hey, where'd the shed go?" And they looked me dead in the eye. "Do you want to know, Gunny?" I guess I don't. So after the phasmo, the shed reappeared. I'll tell you 2 more stories about my NCOs. They come in one day, and I'm allowed to have a slush fund of $50. And I had a cigar box. I don't smoke, mind you. And my NCO said, "We want to have a family party in the motor pool." I said, "Okay, get the box." Well, they got the box. There was $800 and some in that box. I about had a heart attack.
How'd that happen?
I said, "Hey," what they did was 110, 210, 310 had soda machines, and they would go collect the cans and take the cans out in town and sell and turn them in for money.
Wow.
Yeah, well, I'm allowed to have $50. Any more than that, I get in trouble big time. So I said, "Hey, So they had the party. They bought clown. They did a bunch of things. They didn't have to go to the chow hall for any food. So the next time, about 3 to 4 months later, they want to have a stag party in the motor pool. They want to play cards and have beer. I said, "Okay, I collect the keys." I said, "Go get the box." Well, now there's $500 in the box. I said, "What did they tell you about this?" They said, "The colonel said it was okay." I said, "Excuse me?" He said, "Yeah, the colonel said it was okay." Now, you all know that there's a rank structure in the Marine Corps. So I took a trip up to the colonel, and I knocked on the door. I said, "Sir, how you doing?" "Oh, fine, Gunny." I says, in the last few months, have the rank structure changed? What are you talking about? I said, well, Gunny, Colonel, they got to come to me first, but apparently my NCOs have come to you. He goes, oh yeah, they invited me to card playing. I said, they invited you but didn't invite me? I said, sir? And he kind of looked sheepish. I said, okay. I said, tell you what, if you go, you give me the keys. And whatever you lose, I don't want to know about it. So that night, they went down to motor pool. Everybody gave me the keys. I slept up top. I didn't drink. They did. And the following morning, everything was cleaned up. The colonel lost $150.
Now, are there any kind of rules against that, sir?
Yeah.
Okay, good enough.
Yeah, but that's what you call. I had good relationship with my officers because. Okay, here's one more story, and then I'll stop. Colonel Socklaven, who was a regimental colonel, gave my lieutenant colonel a direct order, straight up. You tell Gunny Campbell no scrounging parts when he goes to Bragg. Because I would circumvent the supply system and go there. Fort Bragg was a Christmas a shopping mall for me. I would go parts, I'd get parts all over the place. But Colonel Socklaven gave Colonel Pace to tell me no more scrounging. So we get to Bragg, and Colonel Pace grabs me, Lieutenant Colonel Pace grabs me, we walk off in the woods. And he told me, the colonel said, gave him an order to give me an order, no scrounging. I go, yes, sir. He puts his hand on my shoulder, he goes, the scope of the mission, Gunny, is for you to keep the trucks moving. Did you read that?
Yep. Yes. Sure did.
I go, yes, sir. And I looked at him, I said, okay. So one day I'm coming back from Main Side, Fort Bragg, and here comes Colonel Socklaven's Hummer going this way. And he gets out of the vehicle. How you doing, sir? He goes, are you scrounging, Gunny? I said, no, sir. So I had a Hummer full of parts. I was packed. And my colonel calls me aside. He said, Colonel Socklaven says you weren't scrounging. I said, no, sir. I said, I would put a can of coffee down and it would disappear and an alternator would reappear. I said, who am I to insult my fellow Army guys? Sir, do you want me to do that? So recently, in the last 2 years, I called Colonel Socklaven. I found his number and I said, you know, I have a confession to make. I didn't lie to you, but I really tell you the truth. And he laughed. He goes, I know damn well you didn't, Gunny. But anyways, that's the other thing in the Marine Corps. Gunnies, they're the way they're, and I'd like to go talk to a gunny class. When you work for an officer, there's a bond there. Oftentimes an officer won't have to give you a direct order to do something. You'll automatically do it. You'll cover that officer's position big time. You work with him for 3 reasons. 1, that's your job. 2, that's your respect. And 3, he's a fellow officer. He's with you. And there's a good thing there, a good bond. And you guys, you have officers that.
We do.
Let's yeah. Are we done?
Oh, well, I can say very happily, Gunnery Sergeant Warren Campbell, thank you very much. This has been fun.
My friends call me Pops.
Pops.
I gained that nickname in 1977. I was driving a Captain McGinnis.
Well, you sure weren't an old man then.
No, I was 25, 26 years around there. I don't know. But we were loading an LKA and an LST in Morehead City. It was pouring rain. And he put a white helmet on me, and we helped load these 2 ships. And it was 28 hours later. He said, come on, Pops, I'll get you a cup of coffee. And my fellow Marines heard that, and it stuck.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah, 1977. So anyways, thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.